And that's time. Hello to anyone who's there. Assuming anyone is there, of course. I am not SkitterSkreetch. Or maybe I am, it's sort of confusing. But yeah. Oh, there we go, blinking in and out again. Grand. So let me elaborate a little bit. For those of you who are regulars here, you might be aware of a number of redeems for channel points called Invoke the R. They come in a variety of colours. Those being blue, red, green and purple. Normally I'm what you get when you get the purple, not the purple, the green one, obviously. I'm green, why would I? And there's two ways to interpret what that means. Either I am the sort of meta voice, is the person who's running this thing, the one who acknowledges that actually I'm a streamer, looking at a screen right now and doing things and not actually a rat inside of a library. Or I am a spirit made up of various other sundry spirits by a lamp to think that I'm a streamer who's running things from behind the scenes. And actually I'm a sort of ghost designed to sort of consult with him on the way to manage this stream best. And yeah, generally I'm pretty sure it's the former, but you never know really. I think it's pretty clear the sort of person who would make that choice in fiction would be perhaps not the most sure of themselves from a mental standpoint. Let's start over again. So hello. In some ways I am SkitterSkreetch, but if you want to have a distinct name to call me, you can call me Icon. With a K. Because that's not symbolic, well, it's got symbolic meaning, but I'm sure you don't care. Anyhow, why am I here? No one's invoked the eye. I don't think you can even do it between streams. And the truth is the truth is that I'm a bit unsure too as well to exactly why I'm here. Maybe there's some reason in the library that's actually going on and I've just been put here by lamp. Or maybe not, maybe it's what I think. And my head's just not in the greatest place today, and so I wanted to address things a bit more directly for a change. I don't know if this character's ever actually been on screen in the 80 some odd streams I've done so far. It's funny really, I sort of build in a baked in character for addressing meta questions. No, I was briefly on once, wasn't it? When during the Londonathon, that's right, someone come in and I switched to it to answer questions legitimately. Although in retrospect I think they were just someone trying to drum up commissions. I didn't realise it at the time. But yeah, I haven't gotten a lot of use out of this. Which is strange really. The whole reason I got into streaming was I meant to talk to people more. And the old time I've been doing it for characters, eh? Putting in a bit more of the voice, you know? Lowering things down, doing a bit more cockney. Lean into it a bit. Why am I here? I know I had a reason, I don't know. My head's not exactly screwed on straight. Like I say all the time. And I've been having a bit of a rough day of it. And so I thought, you know, change things up, you know, do things a little different. Couldn't think of a way to do my normal boyhood intro, so I thought I'd come in as myself. Talk a bit about the whole project overall. The old library thing, why not? Let's move over here. It's strange really. Oh look, having problems with the Fugi again. Well, hopefully it'll kick back in. I've been having quite a lot of tech issues lately, it's very hot where I am at the minute. Unbearably hot really. It's been going on for 5 days now, just an unbreakable heat wave. It's really starting to get me. Let's see if we should switch. Nope. No, just having issues. Oh well, let's have issues then. Oh look, the music's died too. I love when that happens. Oh well. So let's talk about the library then. The whole idea behind it. Why did I decide to start doing books? I've talked about this in other places. Part of it is tent limitations. I mean, as you can see, I'm already struggling here, and I'm not really streaming anything intensive. I've got two tabs open in Firefox. One, the music that I'm playing on YouTube, and the other, reactive for the Fugi. I've got Discord. I've got OBS streaming at, I think, just shy of the lowest possible visual settings. And I've got Paint open so I can update the little leaderboard when someone comes and claims first. Assuming, of course, that someone does. You never know. Not that it's much worth having the Fugi up when it's not loading, no. Still. So yeah, there's technical limitations. I can't really run anything to stream on the PC. So the books, that's a good way to get around it. Read something physically. Something I can do that isn't involved with the thing, I mean, it sort of defeats the point of being a VTuber, doing something off with the computer, but it's something. There are other reasons. But part of it's just that I like books, Always have. I sort of meant to. I used to read classics quite a lot when I was younger. Sort of 15, 16. And I fell out of the habit of it, I mean, it's something I started falling into because I didn't have a lot of access to books. I lived in a country that didn't speak English, and I wasn't particularly proficient in the local language, so I thought, yeah, get what you can get. Classics are free generally, online, you can find them. And then I went to university for a sort of writing related degree, and I don't know, I read a lot of crap since then. I've been meaning to get back into classics for a while. I already started collecting a few before I ever started this, so I thought, yeah, that's a good jump, nice and easy. But that's not the only reason. Part of it is that I find it really dissatisfying today, what you're able to find online. It used to feel like it was easy to find good things to watch, interesting things, Like there was an endless sort of source of engaging and entertaining people sort of fed to you. YouTube was better, Google was better. With time, and especially since AI, it's become harder and harder to find things. Not that I don't think people are still making the good stuff, it's just not really shown to you anymore. And so I thought, well, how can we go make sure we find something that's classic and good, Well, anything that's had the sort of witherall the last about 100 years and still be in print probably has some value to it. And part of it's just that I think it's important that people try things nowadays, hard things. I don't mean me, although it's not always easy getting through these. Not all of them are fun. But I mean, I think there's too much stuff nowadays that is just really easy to get into. I don't mean that it's bad that there's stuff that's easy to get into. That stuff has its place, don't get me wrong. It's fine to relax with stuff. But it feels like these days everything you're pushed, everything you're given to consume is easy, and that's all it's designed to be, is easy. Right? I mean, Fugi still won't know this, but I mean, mindless videos or really low-level stuff. I mean, the number of people who I've met who, like reading, only really read young adult stuff, because, that's the stuff that gets pushed. That's the level that they're comfortable with. And I don't think it's a moral failing, let me be clear on that. I don't think it's anyone's fault that they're like this, or that this is what's happened. Well, no, I do think it's people's fault, but it's not the people who are doing it. I think there's been a push by rich and powerful people to make people like that, to simplify things. Life for most people nowadays is awful, but it's also easy. You know what I mean? Not in the sense that it's like not difficult to deal with, but that all the terrible things that happen just happen. The system is set up to let it wash over you, for you to get by and do what you can. And not everything is easy, it's getting worse, but more and more we are conditioned to do nothing, or to do so little, it feels to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just me. But it feels like there's so much that is predicated on people just being able to get by and not worry about things. And one of the things I know in myself is that I've become more passive with time. Especially since COVID, I've sort of let myself get used to doing nothing, to being comfortable and not doing anything hard. So I thought, let's do something a little bit difficult, you know? Something a little bit difficult to engage with, something you sort of need to stick your teeth into. Let's do some classic literature, and let's do critical engagement with it. Let's talk about it after the fact. Let's see if that isn't something, huh? It's maybe a bit pretentious. Probably a bit pretentious. It's probably very pretentious if I'm real, but I think the world could use more pretensions too. I think too much of the time people talk about content rather than art. I think that's sad. And so that's what I do, you know? I come here, I read my books, I talk about them, and I hope people engage with them. I know people enjoy them. I hope that's good. That's too. I like that. But yeah, there's the big whole laid out thing, you know? There's what it is I'm meant to be doing here. Teaching you. The big joke, of course, being that Lamb thinks he's teaching you. And I do hope you get something out of this. Or even if you're just enjoying it, listening to it in the background, I hope that helps you. But if you want to engage, if you want to sink your teeth into things, work at something, maybe try to get with it and not learn just what's in these books, but also why it's there, get your head around it. Well, I'd be very glad for that too. I hope some of you are interested in that. And if you're not, well, you're free to come and just listen. I don't know why I'm telling you any of this, really. I don't think it makes for good content, especially not with the music continually dropping out and my Fugi not loading and nothing really being in place. I don't know. I'm just having a weird day. I felt like I need to change things up. And after all, the point of having different characters is you can change things up when you need to. There's still enough of that, eh? Let's go back to how things should be. Let's go back to the rat. Who knows, maybe things will start right. Oh no. Reactor is having problems. Who could have assessed? Right, well, let's see if this will work, shall we? I don't know how this gap happens, really. I get everything loaded up beforehand. I'll try to make it as clean as possible. As minimal load as possible, but sometimes it just doesn't work, you know? C'est la vie. What is. Or is it? Who can say, really? Maybe what is isn't. Maybe a ghost's been talking to you this whole time, and maybe you's all ghosts as well. Drifting spirits wandering through a cursed library. Fallen prey to lamp and whatever machinations he has. I wouldn't know. I'm just a construct. Or am I? Am I anything? Maybe I'm just a rat. Maybe. Maybe. At the moment, I'm nothing at all. Little mountain inside a cogwheel. Well, reactor says it should be working now. It's not, but it should be. And when it comes back on, I should be Skitter again. So who's to say, eh? Who's to say? This stream's a mess and a half, isn't it? Oh, nope. Really don't want to go off today. That's what I get, really. Oh. Do any of these screens want to work? No. We're just stuck here. Do we go ahead without it? I don't even know why I insist on the thing, really. It's just two different PNGs that I spoof between. It just feels like it means I've got a presence, you know? As opposed to nothingness. Opposed to just being an empty screen that reads to you. It always feels like it's stuff like this that happens, you know? Things go wrong on bad days. Or maybe things go wrong because of bad days, you know? The old power of manifestation. You feel bad, so bad things happen to you. Or bad things happen to you, so you feel bad. Chicken or egg first, right? Enough of this. Enough of this indeed. Let's start working for fuck's sake. Nope. I thought maybe moving to a screen that didn't have a Fugi on it might reload things, but no. So that behind the camera today then. Alright. Well enough then, so we've done our little bit of intro spiel. We had a guest do it for us, who can say really. And so I'll sit behind the camera today while I read, since I can't be on screen. Interference in the wards, you understand, I don't know what it is. Lamp says something about undue spiritual residue or whatever. Can't speak to it. But yeah, I think last night when I was doing the Melville during some of the ad breaks, I said I was planning to do some more Melville and then a short novel this week, but I couldn't, I just wasn't up to it. Been a bit of a weird day, you know? Energy's a bit off. Something Lamp's doing with the wards, I'm sure. Always redirecting energies like that, you know? Makes the whole place feel strange. So yeah, instead I went and got some more of the M.R. Jameses. I said I've been putting it off, and I had been, so I thought, yeah, sod it, let's go get the lot of them, at least we'll know how many we got left then. Turns out the answer's 12. 12 more of these and then we're out. Don't know where to find any more, I'm not even sure there is any more. Don't know how many you wrote, so. You can't see the bottom row anymore, but we got them here. And we'll be starting, of course, with a diary of Mr. Poynter. And see how we got on the day. I don't feel like we're doing anything too long today, because my head's not really in it, but we'll do at least the one. Always like to do at least one of these. Does the interference stop? Yeah, let's find out. Nope. So we'll start on the first one. And if anyone comes by to complain that I'm not on the screen, maybe we'll try again and see if the thing works. But 2M. Just an empty book screen and books reading themselves. At least I noticed the difference, eh? Oh, my mistake, sir. It's not the diary of Mr. Poynter, it's the diary of Mr. Poynter. I swore it was right. I think it does say an A on the outside of the thing. Well, strange. Anyhow. As always, if you're here and you missed something, or you need me to repeat something, or you haven't gotten something out of this, and you just want me to start again, let me know. If you've got any comments, thoughts, opinions, just want to have a word, I'm always very happy to have a chat with you. Have a quick drink of water before I begin, because got to keep the throat moist and ready. Yeah, that's about the long and short of it. So, unless there's anyone has anything particularly pressing to say to me, then without any further ado, I shall begin. The Diary of Mr. Poynter. The sale room of an old and famous firm of book auctioneers in London is, of course, a great meeting place for collectors, librarians and dealers. Not only when an auction is in progress, but perhaps even more notably when books that are coming on for sale are up on view. It was in such a sales room that the remarkable series of events began, which was detailed to me not many months ago by the person who they principally affected, namely, Mr. James Denton, M.A., F.S.A., etc., etc., sometime at Trinity Hall, now, or lately, at Rencombe Manor in the country of Warwick. He, on a certain spring day in a recent year, were in London for a few days upon business connected principally with the furnishing of the house which he had just finished building at Redcombe. It may be a disappointment to you to learn that Redcombe Manor were new. That I cannot help. There had no doubt been an old house, but it were not remarkable for beauty or interest. Even had it been, neither beauty nor interest would have enabled it to resist the disastrous fire which about a couple of years before the date of my story had razed it to the ground. I am glad to say that all that was most valuable in it had been saved, and that it were fully insured, so that it were with a comparatively light heart that Mr. Denham were able to face the task of building a new and considerably more convenient dwelling for himself and his aunt, who constituted his own melange. Being in London, with time on his hands, and not far from the sale room at which I have obscurely hinted, Mr. Denton thought that he would spend an hour there upon the chance of finding, among that portion of the famous Thomas collection of MSS, which he knew to be then on view, something bearing the history or topography of his part of Warwickshire. He turned in accordingly, purchased a catalogue, and ascended to the sales room, where as usual the books was disposed in cases, some laid out upon the long tables. At the shelves, or sitting about the table, were figures, many of whom was familiar to him. He exchanged nods and greeting with several, and then settled down to examine his catalogue and note likely items. He had made good progress for about 200 of the 500 lots, every now and then rising to take a volume from the shelf and give it a cursory glance, when an hand was laid upon his shoulder, and he looked up. His interrupter was one of them intelligent men with a pointed beard and a flannel shirt, of whom the last quarter of the 19th century were, it seems to me, very prolific. It is no part of my plan to repeat the old conversation which ensued between the two. I must content myself with stating that it largely referred to a common acquaintance, e.g. to the nephew of Mr. Denton's friend, who had recently married and settled in Chelsea, to the sister-in-law of Mr. Denton's friend, who had been seriously indisposed, but now better, and to a piece of china which Mr. Denton's friend had purchased some months before at a price much below its true value, from which you will rightly infer that the conversation were rather in the nature of a monologue. In due time, however, the friend bethought himself that Mr. Denton were there for a purpose, and said he, "What are you looking for in particular? I don't think there's much in this lot." "Well, I thought there might be some Warwickshire collections, but I don't see anything under Warwick in the catalogue." "No, apparently not," said the friend. "All the same, I believe I noticed something like a Warwickshire diary. What was the name again? Drayton, Potter, Painter. Either a P or a D, I feel sure." He turned over the leaves quickly. "Yes, here it is. Poynter. Lot 486. That might interest you. There are the books, I think, out on the table. Someone has been looking at them. Well, I must be getting on. Goodbye. You'll look us up, won't you? Couldn't you come this afternoon? We've got a little music about 4. Well then, when you're next in town." He went off. Mr. Denton looked at his watch and found that his confusion, he could spare no more than a moment before retrieving his luggage and going for the train. The moment were just enough to show him that there were 4 largest volumes of a diary. They concerned the years about 1710, and there seemed to be a good many insertions in it of various kinds. It seemed quite worthwhile to leave a commission of £5.20 for it, and this he were able to do, for his usual agent entered the room as he were on the point of leaving him. That evening he rejoined his aunt at their temporary abode, which were a small dower house not many 100 yards from the manor. On the following morning the two resumed a discussion that now lasted for some weeks as to the equipment of the new house. Mr. Denton laid before his relative a statement of the results of his visit to town, particulars of carpets, of chairs, of wardrobes, and of bedroom china. "Yes, dear," said his aunt, "but I don't see any chintzes here. Did you go to blank?" Mr. Denton stamped on the floor, where else indeed could he have stamped. "Oh dear," he said. "Oh, one thing I missed. I am sorry. The fact is, I was on my way there, and I happened to be passing but Robin's." His aunt threw up her hands. "Robin's? The next thing will be another parcel of horrible old books at some outrageous price. I do think, James, when I am taking all this trouble for you, you might contrive to remember the 1 or 2... Hey, Abby. Things which I especially begged you to see after. It's not as if I was asking for myself. I don't know whether you think I get any pleasure out of it. The show can assure you it's very much the reverse. Hey, Abby. Good to have you. Well, I've been having some technical issues, so Lamp decided that so today Lamp decided that the introduction should be given by one of the ghosts that he occasionally has possessed my body, and then following that, for some reason, it won't let me show up on the thing that he uses to display this. Like, it causes distortion, so I just went off. I'm behind the camera today. Let's see if it will let me back on yet. Will it? Oh yeah, there we are. I'm like, oh, I don't seem to be moving. I seem to be a static image for some reason. Oh, and there's the distortion again. Well, we'll see how this goes, shall we? But we'll leave it up. I'll stay on screen for a moment and maybe it will fix itself. But for now, first things first, we've got to go and mark your... Yeah, no idea what's going on. But yeah, we'll go and mark your little thing. I am behind that weird distortion you see on the screen. I promise. You have my word, and as a rat, you know I'm very trustworthy. But yeah, let's mark you up there. Oh. I'm sure that me marking and changing things in the library certainly will not cause any interference today. No, so yeah, no, that seems to just work fine. You never know what's going to go wrong, but yeah. I'll head back to the thing. Let's do wrong one. Let's do my recap then. So just as to where we are. Reading the story called Mr. Poynter's Diary from M.R. James. I went and got the rest of the Jameses from the little collection I've been perusing. So we've got them all here. 12 more of them. What has happened? So, our narrator has told us that this story concerns the account of something that happened in a book auctioneer's in London. The person we're following went in looking for some books on the English county of Warwickshire, where he's built his new house. Was looking through the catalogue, ran into a friend who sort of talked his ear off and kept him, but did in the end point him towards 4 old diaries of a Mr. Poynter, or I should say a diary of a Mr. Poynter in 4 volumes from around about 1710, which seemed promising, but he didn't have time to look at them. He left a bid with an agent of his, and then left to catch the train and collect his luggage. And now he has come back to his temporary residence outside the manor he's built in Warwickshire, and he's currently arguing with his aunt over having forgotten to get some chintzes because he stopped in at the bookshop. And yeah, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to be on screen today, so I'll move back behind the camera and continue on. I know it's devastating not to be able to see my charming little figure, but you should have to content yourself today with just the story, I'm afraid. But yeah. Anyway, that's where we are with the story. I'll have another quick drink of water. And we'll press on. So, it's not as if I was asking it for myself. I don't know whether you think I get any pleasure out of it, but if so, I can assure you very much the reverse. The thought and worry and trouble I have over it, you have no idea of, and you have simply to go to the shops and order these things. Mr. Denton interposed a moan of penitence. Oh, Aunt, Yes, that's all very well, dear, and I don't want to speak sharply. You must know how very annoying it is, particularly as it delays the whole of our business, for I can't tell how long. Here it is Wednesday. The Simpsons come tomorrow, and you can't leave then. Then on Saturday we have friends, as you know, coming for tennis. Yes, indeed, you spoke of asking them yourself, but of course I had to write the note, and it was ridiculous, James, to look like that. We must occasionally be civil to our neighbours. You wouldn't like to have it said we were perfect bears. What was I saying? Well, anyhow, it comes to this, that it must be Thursday in next week, at least, before you can go to town again. Until we have decided upon the chintzes, it is impossible to settle upon one single other thing. Mr. Denton ventured to suggest, as the paint and wallpapers had been dealt with, this were too severe a view. But this his aunt were not prepared to admit at the minute. Nor indeed were there any proposition he could have advanced which she would have found herself able to accept. However, as the day went on, she receded a little from this position, examined with lessening disfavour the samples and price lists submitted by her nephew, and even in some cases gave a qualified approval to his choice. As for him, he were naturally somewhat dashed by the conspicuousness of duty unfulfilled, but more so by the prospect of a lawn tennis party which, though an inevitable evil in August, he had thought there were no occasion to fear in May. But he were to some extent cheered by the arrival on Friday morning of an intimation that he had secured the price of £12 and 10 shillings for the four volumes of Poynter's manuscript diary, and still more by the arrival on the next morning of the diary itself. The necessity of taking Mr. and Mrs. Simpson for a drive in the car on Saturday morning, and of attending to his neighbours and guests that afternoon, prevented him from doing more than open the parcel until the party had retired to bed on the Saturday night. It was then that he made certain of the fact, which he had only before speculated, that he had indeed acquired the diary of Mr. William Poynter, Squire of Accrington, about 4 miles from his own parish. That same Poynter who was for a time a member of the circle of Oxford antiquaries, the centre of which were Thomas Erne, and with whom Erne seems ultimately to have quarrelled, a not uncommon episode in the career of that excellent man. As is the case with Erne's own collections, the diary of Poynter contained a good many notes from printed books, descriptions of coins and other antiquities that have been brought to his notice, and drafts of letters on these subjects, beside the chronicle of everyday events. The description in the sales catalogue had given Mr. Denton no idea of the amount of interest which seemed to lie in the book, and he sat up reading in the first of the 4 volumes until a reprehensibly late hour. On the Sunday morning after church, his aunt came into the study and were diverted from what she had been going to say to him by the sight of the 4 brown leather quarters on the table. "What are these?" she said suspiciously. "New, aren't they?" "Oh, are these the things that made you forget my chances? I thought so. Disgusting. What did you give for them, I should like to know? Over £10? James, it is really sinful. Well, if you have money to throw away on this kind of thing, there can be no reason why you should not subscribe, and subscribe handsomely, to my Anti-Vivisection League. There is not indeed, James, and I shall be very seriously annoyed if... Who did you say wrote them? Old Mr. Poynter of Accrington. Well, of course, there is some interest in getting together old papers about the neighbourhood. But £10! She picked up one of the volumes, not that which her nephew had been reading, and opened it at random, dashing it to the floor the next instant with a cry of disgust, as an earwig fell from between the pages. Mr. Denton picked it up with a smothered expletive and said, "Poor book! I think you're rather hard on Mr. Poynter." "Was I, my dear? I beg his pardon, and you know I cannot abide those horrid creatures. Let me see if I've done any mischief. No, I think all's well. But look here what you've opened him on." "Dear me, yes, to be sure, very interesting. Do unpin it, James, and let me have a look at it." It were a piece of pattern stuff, about the size of the quarto page, to which it were fastened by an old-fashioned pin. James detached it and handed it to his aunt, carefully replacing the pin in the paper. Now, I do not know exactly what the fabric were, but it had his arm printed upon it, which completely fascinated Miss Denton. She went into raptures over it, held it against the wall, made James do the same, She might retire to contemplate it from a distance, then pored over it at close quarters, and ended her examination by expressing in the warmest terms her appreciation of the taste of the ancient Mr. Poynter, who had the happy idea of preserving this sample in his diary. "It is a most charming pattern," she said, "and remarkable too. Look, James, how delightfully the little ripples, or the lines ripple. It reminds one of hair very much, doesn't it? And then these knots of ribbon at intervals, they give just the relief of colour that is wanted. I wonder." "I was going to say," said James with deference, I wonder if it would cost much to have it copied for our curtains." "Copied? How could you have it copied, James?" "Well, I don't know the details, but I suppose that is a printed pattern, and that you could have a block cut out for it in wood or metal." "Oh, really? That is a capital idea, James. I'm almost inclined to be glad that you forgot the chintzes on Wednesday. At any rate, I'll promise to forgive and forget if you get this lovely old thing copied. No one will have anything in the least like it, and mind, James, we weren't allowed to be sold. I must go, and I've totally forgotten what it was I come to say. Never mind, it'll keep." After his aunt had gone, James Denton devoted a few minutes to examining the pattern more closely than he had yet had a chance of doing. He was puzzled to think why it should have struck Miss Denton so forcibly. It seemed to him not especially remarkable or pretty. No doubt it was suitable enough for a curtain pattern. It ran in vertical bands, and there was some indication that these were intended to converge at the top. So you were right, too, in thinking that the main bands resembled rippling, almost curling, tresses of hair. Well, the main thing was to find out, by means of trade directories or otherwise, what firm would undertake the reproduction of an old pattern of this kind. Not to delay the reader over this portion of the story, a list of likely names were made out, and Mr. Denton fixed a day for calling on them, or some of them, with his sample. The first 2 visits which he paid were unsuccessful, but there is luck in odd numbers. The firm in Bermondsey, which was third on his list, was accustomed to angle in this line. The evidence that they were able to produce justified their being entrusted with the job. Mr. Cattle took a fervent personal interest in it. It's hair trending, isn't it, sir?" he said. "A picture of the quality of really lovely medieval stuff of this kind that lays well nigh unnoticed in many of our residential country houses. Much of it in peril, I take it, and then cast aside as so much rubbish. What is it Shakespeare says? Unconsidered trifles. I often say as he has a word for all us, sir. I say Shakespeare, but I'm well aware it all done over me there. I had something of an upset the other day when a gentleman come in, a title man too he were, and I think he told me he'd wrote on the topic, and I happened to say out something about Hercules and painted cloth. Dear me, you never seen such a bother. But as to this, what you've kindly confided to us, it's a piece of work we should take real enthusiasm in achieving it out to the very best of our ability. What man has done, as I was observing only a few weeks back to another of its esteemed client, man can do, and in 3 to 4 weeks' time, all being well, we shall hope to lay before the evidence to the effect, sir. Take the address, Mr. Higgins, if you please." Such were the general drift of Mr. Cattle's observations on the occasion of his first interview with Mr. Denton. About a month later, being advised that some samples was ready for his inspection, Mr. Denton met him again, and had, it seems, a reason to be satisfied with the faithfulness of the reproduction of the design. It had been finished off at the top in accordance with the indication I mentioned, so that the vertical bands joined. Something still needed to be done in the way of matching the colour of the original. Mr. Cattle had suggestions of a technical kind to offer, with which I need not trouble you. He had also views as to the general desirability of the pattern, which were vaguely averse. "You say you don't wish this to be supplied except to personal friends equipped with an authorization for yourself, sir. It shall be done. I quite understand your wish to keep it exclusive. Then's a catch it done it not to the sweet. What's every man's, it's been said, is no man's." "You think it would be popular if it were generally attainable?" asked Mr. Denton. "I hardly think it, sir," said Cattle pensively, tossing his beard. "I hardly think it. Not popular. And one popular with a man that cut the block, were it, Mr. Higgins?" "Did he find it a difficult job?" "He had no call to do so, sir. But the fact is, the artistic temperament, and our men are artists, sir, every one of them, true artists, as much as many of the world styles by that term. It's hard to take some strange, hardly accountable likes or dislikes, and here were an example. Twice or thrice did I went to inspect his progress, language I could understand, but that's habitual to him. A real distaste for what I should call a dainty enough thing. I did not, nor am I now able to fathom. It seemed, said Mr. Cattle, looking narrowly upon Mr. Denton, as if the man scented some almost evil in the design. Indeed, did he tell you so? I can't say I see anything sinister in him myself. Neither can I, sir. In fact, I said as much. Come, get what I said. What's the do here? What's the reason of your prejudice? For I can tell it no more than that. But no explanation were forthcoming. They were nicely reduced, as I am now, to shrug of the shoulders and a cui bono. However, here it is. Without the technical side of the question, come to the front again. The matching of the colours for the background, the M, and the knots of the ribbons were by far the longest part of the business, and necessitated many sendings to and fro of the original pattern and of new samples. During part of August and September too, the Dentons was away from the manor, so that it was not until October was well in that sufficient quantity of the stuff that had been manufactured to furnish curtains for the for the 3 or 4 bedrooms was to be fitted up with it. On the feast of Simon and Jude, the aunt and nephew returned from a short visit to find all completed, and their satisfaction of the general effect was great. The new curtains, in particular, agreed to admiration with the surroundings. While Mr. Denton was dressing for dinner and took stock of his room, in which there were a large amount of the chintz displayed, he congratulated himself over and over again on the luck which had first made him forget his aunt's commission, and had then put into his hands this extremely effective means of remedying his mistake. The pattern were, as he said at dinner, so restful and yet so far from being dull. And Miss Denton, who, by the way, had none of the stuff in her own room, were much disposed to agree with him. At breakfast next morning, he was induced to qualify his satisfaction to some extent, but very slightly. There's one thing I rather regret, he said, that we allowed them to join up the vertical bands of the pattern at the top. I think it would have been better to leave that alone. Oh? Asked his aunt interrogatively. Yeah. As I was reading in bed last night, I kept catching my eye, rather. That is, I found myself looking across at them every now and then. They were in effect as if someone kept peeping out between the curtain in one place or another, when there were no edge, and I think that was due to the joining up of the bands at the top. The only other thing that troubled me was the wind. Why, I thought it was perfectly still now. Perhaps you were only on my side of the house, but there were enough to sway my curtains and rustle them round more than I wanted. That night, a bachelor friend of James Denton's come to stay, and were lodged in a room on the same floor as his host, but at the end of a long passage, halfway down, which were a red glazed door put there to cut off the draught and intercept noise. The party of 3 had separated. Miss Denton, a good first, and the 2 men about 11. James Denton, not yet inclined for bed, sat down in an armchair and read for a time. Then he dozed, and then he woke, and bethought himself that his brown spaniel, which ordinarily slept in his room, had not come upstairs with him. Then he thought he was mistaken, for having to move his arm, which hung down over the arm of the chair within a few inches of the floor, he felt on the back of it just the slightest touch of the surface of air, and stretching it out in the direction he stroked and patted around at something. But the feel of it, and still more the fact that instead of a responsive movement, absolute stillness greeted his touch, made him look over the arm. What he had been touching rose to meet him. It were in the attitude of one that had crept along the floor on its belly, and it were, so far as could be recollected, a human figure. But the face, which were now rising to within a few inches of his own, when no features were discernible, only air. Shapeless as it were, there were about it so horrible an air of menace that as he bounded from his chair and rushed from the room, he heard himself moaning with fear. And doubtless he did right to fly. As he dashed into the blazed door that cut a passage in two, and, forgetting that it opened towards him, beat against it with all the force in him, he felt a soft, ineffectual tearing at his back, which, all the same, seemed to be growing in power, as if the hand, or whatever worse than a hand, were there, were becoming more material as the pursuer's rage were more concentrated. Then he remembered the trick of the door, got it open, he shut it behind him, he gained his friend's room, and that is all we need to know. It seems curious that, during all the time that had elapsed since the purchase of Poynter's diary, James Denton should not have sought an explanation of the presence of the pattern that had been printed into it. Where he had read the diary throughout without finding it mentioned, and concluded that there was nothing to be said. But on leaving Rencoe Manor, he did not know whether for good, as he naturally insisted upon doing on the day after he experienced the horror. I have tried to put in the words. He took the diary with him, and at his seaside lodging he examined more narrowly the portion whence the pattern had been taken. What he remembered, having suspected about it, turned out to be correct. 2 or 3 leaves was pasted together, but written upon it, as was patent when they were held up to the light. They yielded easily to steaming from the paste, for the pasted lots mustered with strength, and they contained something relevant to the pattern. The entry were made in 1707. Old Mr. Caspary of Accrington told me this day much of young Sir Edmund Charlotte, who he remembered a commoner of University College, and thought was of the same family as Dr. Arthur Charlotte, now master of the École. This Charlotte, at comparison, was a personable young gent, but a loose, atheistical companion, and a great lifter, as they called the hard drinkers, and what I know do so now. He was noted and subjected to several censures at different times for his extravagancies, and if the full history of his debaucheries had been known, no doubt would have been expelled École, supposing that no interest had been employed on his behalf, of which Mr. Caspary had some suspicion. He was a very beautiful person, and constantly wore his own hair, which were very abundant, from which, and his loose way of living, a cant name for him was Absalom, and he were accustomed to say that indeed he believed he had shortened old David's days, meaning his father, Sir Job Charlotte, an old worthy cavalier. Note that Mr. Caspary said that he remembered not the year of Sir Everard Charlotte's death. It was 1962 or 3. He died suddenly in October. Several lines describing his unpleasant habits and reputed delinquencies are omitted. Having seen him in such topping spirits the night before, Mr. Caspary was amazed when he learned of the death. He was found in the town ditch, the hair, as was said, plucked clean off his head. Most bells in Oxford rang out for him, being a nobleman, and he was buried next night in St. Peter's in the east. But 2 years after, being so moved to his country estate by his successor, it was shed the coffin, breaking by mischance, proved quite full of hair. It sounds fabulous, but yet I believe precedents are upon recorded, as in Dr. Plott's History of Staffordshire. His chambers being afterwards stripped, Mr. Caspary came by part of the hangings of it, which was said that Charlotte had designed expressly for a memorial of his hair, giving the fellow that drew it a lock to work by, and the piece which I have fastened in here was parcel of the same, which Mr. Caspary gave to me. He said he believed there was a subtlety in the drawing, but had never discovered it himself, nor much like to pore upon it. The money spent upon the curtains might as well have been thrown into the fire, as they were. Mr. Cow's comment upon what he had heard of the story took the form of a quotation from Shakespeare. You may guess it without difficulty. It begins with the words, "There are more things." That's the end of the diary of Mr. Poynter. Shall we see if I can come back for the commentary? May as well. Nope, still interference. No sign of me, it seems. Oh well. Well, I'll give it a moment while I talk, shall we? So, a pretty typical James story. You have, interestingly enough here actually, you don't have a cursed object, you have a cursed pattern, which is then used to remake a cursed object, which I think is quite interesting. But that's about the most interesting thing about it, really. It occurs to me that the only horror part is actually about 3 pages before the end of the piece. But yeah, you have these curtains, presumably symbolically made of this fellow's hair, who may be out to murder his father and who died in strange and horrible circumstances. And these air curtains summon some sort of air geist that, there's that particularly horrible scene where he thinks he's reaching down to stroke his dog and he begins patting the air gust, which... That's good and startling, that one. There's a good bit of horror there. And the stuff before it is alright. It's a fairly short one, even by the standards of James's short stories. But yeah. But it's quite a shocking story. The characters are interesting. There's a little bit of history, which makes it compelling enough. And again, you have the immediate sort of cessation and dealing with the issue. This is pretty common to James's protagonists. I don't know. I mean, there's not a lot to this one, is the thing. Which is a shame, because I think it's one of the more interesting little objects, like the horror-wise, the sort of ghastly air. I don't know, maybe it's just the one scene of good horror that is in it that grabbed me. But yeah, I don't think I've got too much else to say. I almost feel like I should call this one short, really. Like, I'm not up on screen at all. So it feels like I'm sort of wasting the time of being here, but I'm enjoying these as well. How long's the next one? If it's not very long, we'll do the next one. If it is, we'll maybe call it here. Let's see that. The next one is an episode of Cathedral History, and that runs 27 pages, which this one ran 17, so it's longer than that one. But probably not quite an hour of reading time, I suspect, if we was to take our time with it. Yeah, right, we'll do it. Why not? I'm trying to do more of these. I'm trying to do longer. I think they're better when they're longer, and if my voice can take it, I like to do them. So, will we? Does it make sense to do them if you can't see me? I don't know. I guess it's a bit weird, but then, what do you normally get out of seeing me, I guess? Well, I'm also worried that there's technical issues with this. I know I'm dropping some frames now and then, which I don't know. Sorry, we'll press on. I'll probably have to stop pretty shortly because I think the ads is about due, but we'll start on the next one anyway. I say start. We'll go through the next one, but we'll start on it now. But yeah, and I'll get off the screen again because I'm just flickering and showing and not doing anything. Right then. An episode of Cathedral History. There were once a learned gentleman who was deputised to examine and report upon the archives of the Cathedral of Southminster. Examinations of these records demand a very considerable expenditure of time, hence it became advisable for him to engage lodging in the city. But though the cathedral body were profuse in their efforts of hospitality, Mr. Lake felt that he would prefer to be master of his day. This was recognised as reasonable. The Dean eventually wrote, advising Mr. Lake, if he were not already suited, to communicate with a Mr. Worby, the principal verger, who occupied an house convenient to the church, and prepared to take in a quiet lodger for 3 or 4 weeks. Such an arrangement was precisely what Mr. Lake desired. Terms were easily agreed upon, and early in December, like another Mr. Datchery, as he remarked himself, the investigator found himself in the occupation of a very comfortable room in an ancient and cathedraly house. One so familiar with the customs of cathedral churches, and treated with such obvious consideration by the dean and chapter of this cathedral in particular, could not fail to command the respect of the head verger. Mr. Warby even acquiesced in certain modifications of statements he had been accustomed to offer for years to parties of visitors. Mr. Lake, on his part, found the verger a very cheery companion, and took advantage of any occasion that presented itself for enjoying his conversation when the day's work were over. One evening, about 9 o'clock, Mr. Warby knocked at his lodger's door. "I've occasion," he said, "to go across to the cathedral, Mr. Lake, and I think I made you a promise when I did so next. I would give you the opportunity to see what it looks like at night time. It's quite fine and dry outside, if you care to come." "To be sure I will. Very much obliged to you, Mr. Warby, for thinking of it. But let me get my coat. Here it is, sir, and I have another lantern here that you'll find advisable for the steps, as there's no moon. Anyone might think we were Jasper and Durdles over again, mightn't they?" said Lake, as they crossed the close, for he had ascertained that the verger had read Edwin Drood. "And so they might," said Mr. Warby, with a short laugh. "I don't know whether we ought to take it as a compliment. Odd ways, I often think, they had at that cathedral. Don't it seem to you, sir? Full choral matins at 7 o'clock in the morning all year round. Wouldn't suit our boys' voices nowadays, and I think there's 1 or 2 of the men would be applying for a rise if the chapter were to bring it in, particularly the altos. There's now at the southwest of the door." As Mr. Warby ran knocking it, Lake said, "Did you ever find anybody locked in here by accident?" "Twice I did. Once was a drunk sailor. However he got in, I don't know. I suppose he went in to sleep in the service, but by the time I got to him, he was praying fit to bring the roof in. Lord, what a noise the man did make. I said it was the first time he'd been inside a church for 10 years, and blessed if he'd ever try it again. The other was an old sheep, and boys it was, up to their games. That was the last time they tried it on, though. There, sir, now you see what it looks like. Our late Dean used now and again to bring parties in, but he preferred a moonlight night, and there was a piece of verse he'd quote to them relating to a Scotch cathedral, I understand. But I don't know. I almost think the effect's better when it's all dark like. Seems to add to the size and height. Now, if you won't mind stopping in somewhere in the nave while I go up into the choir where my business lays, you'll see what I mean. And I'll stop there, because the ad break is about to start. Have a quick drink of water. Well, thank you kindly, Abbot. Great minds think alike. Have 2 quick drinks of water, and cheers to you. Lord have mercy, 35 streak. Well, thank you kindly, Abbot. It occurs to me that the ad is supposed to be playing, so I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, I'm greatly appreciative of your diligence and continued attendance to these streams. And if you can hear me, well, if you can't hear me, then I shall repeat this after the ad break is over. But I do genuinely appreciate it. Oh, I thank you, Abbot. I never know if these ads are going through or not. It's weird. It says that I've got them set for 3 minutes, so I don't do the the intro ads. Well, I'm always glad to have you, even if you're just lurking. You're a reassuring presence. It's like I expect it's like how it is in one of these stories, you know. Everything is much scarier if there's no one there. But if you've got someone with you, even if they're not saying much, it makes you feel braver. There's plenty of ghosts and cursed objects in this library, so I really could use someone. I mean, Lamp is here, but he's also not. He's basically a cursed object himself. That's an upsetting thought. That's not. I mean, I guess I was going to say, I guess he's not cursed, but he is, I guess, a person's soul trapped inside a magic lamp bar means of rituals like murder. So, actually, the lamp is definitely a cursed object. It's just that the curse is on him. Wizards, man, it's all fucked up. I hate those guys. Or I guess I would hate them. They're all dead now. It's weird though, I feel compelled to wait out the full ad break, even though, as far as I'm aware, you're the only person here, Abbe. But if there is someone else though, who just doesn't feel like chatting, I don't want to leave them out of the story. It feels very rude. So I suppose it's a good habit to get into. But yeah. What can I talk about for 40 more seconds? I'm intimated through suggestions on the Burred website that the World Cup is happening. Which I think means that I'm 4 years old, because I vaguely remember it having happened when I was first born, so yeah, or about 5 maybe, but yeah, I guess that's interesting. I haven't seen any of it. I'm trapped in this library and I do not get any sort of service that would show it, but that's probably exciting for people who follow it, which I don't. What else? I guess I'll have another quick drink and then we'll get back into it. Right, that's any ads that should be on over. So let's press on, shall we? So, now if you won't mind stopping somewhere in the nave while I go up in the choir with my business lays, you'll see what I mean. Accordingly, Late waited, leaning against a pillar, and watched the lark wavering along the length of the church, and up the steps into the choir, until they were intersected by some screen or other furniture, which only allowed the reflection to be seen on the piers and roof. Not many minutes had passed before Warby reappeared at the door of the choir, and, by waving his lantern, signalled the Lake to rejoin him. I suppose it is Warby and not a substitute, thought Lake to himself as he walked up the nave. There were in fact nothing untoward. Warby showed him the papers which he had come to fetch out of the Dean's store, and asked him what he thought of the spectacle. Lake agreed that it was well worth seeing. I suppose, he said, as they walked towards the altar steps together, you're too much used to going about here at night and feel nervous. But you must get a start every now and then, don't you, when a book falls down or a door swings to? No, Mr. Lake, I can't say I think much about noises nowadays. I'm much more afraid of finding an escape of gas or a burst in the stovepipes than anything else. Still, there have been times, yes. Years ago. Did you notice the plain altar tomb there? 15th century, we say it is. I don't know if you agree to that. Well, if you didn't look at it, just come back and give it a glance, if you'd be so good. You're on the north side of the choir, and rather awkwardly placed, only about 3 feet from the enclosing stone screen. Quite plain, as the verger had said, with some ordinary stone panelling. I met a cross of some size on the northern side, next to the screen, with a solitary feature of any interest. Lake agreed that it was not earlier than the perpendicular period, but, he said, unless it's the tomb of some remarkable person, you'll forgive me for saying that I don't think it's particularly noteworthy. Well, I can't say as it is the tomb of anybody noted in history, said Welby, with a dry smile on his face, but we don't own any record whatsoever of who it was put up to. For all that, if you've got an hour to spare, sir, when we get back to the house, Mr. Lake, I could tell you a tale about that tomb. I won't begin on it now. It strikes cold here, and we don't want to be dawdling about all night. Of course, I should like to hear it immensely. Very well, sir, you shall. I might put a question to you. He went on as they passed down the choir aisle. In our little local guide, and not only there, but in the little book on our cathedral in the series, you'll find it stated that this portion of the building was erected previous to the 12th century. Now, of course, I should be glad enough to take that view, but mind the step, sir. But I put it to you, as the lay of the stones here in this portion of the wall, which he tapped with his key, does it to your eye carry the flavour of what you might call Saxon masonry? No, I thought not. No more it does to me. Now, if you'll believe me, I've said as much to those men. One's a librarian of our free library here, and the other came down from London on purpose, 50 times, if I have once. But I might just as well have talked to that bit of stonework. But there it is, I suppose. Everyone's got their opinions. The discussion of this particular trait of human nature occupied Mr. Warby, almost up to the moment when he and Lake re-entered the former's house. The condition of the fire in Lake's sitting room led to a suggestion from Mr. Warby that they should finish the evening in his own parlour. We find them accordingly settled there some short time afterwards. Mr. Warby made his story as a long one, and I will not undertake to tell it wholly in his own words, or in his own order. Lake committed the substance of it to paper immediately after hearing it, together with some few passages of the narrative which had fixed themselves verbatim in his mind. I shall probably find it expedient to condense Lake's record to some extent. Mr. Warby was born, it appeared, about the year 1828. His father before him had been connected with the Cathedral, and likewise his grandfather. One or both had been choristers, and in later life they both had done work as masons and carpenters respectively about the fabric. Welby himself, though possessed, as he frankly acknowledged, of an indifferent voice, had been drafted into the choir at about 10 years of age. It was in 1840 that the wave of the Gothic revival smote the Cathedral of Southminster. There was a lot of lovely stuff within then, sir, said Warby with a sigh. My father couldn't hardly believe it. Well, he believed it when he got orders to clear out the choir. There was a new dean just come in, Dean Burkhardt it was, and my father had been apprenticed to a good firm of joiners in the city, and knew what good work was when he saw it. Cruel it was, he used to say, all that beautiful wainscot oak, as good as the day it would put you up, and garlands like a foliage and fruit, and lovely old gilding work on the coats of arms and the organ pipes. All went to the timber yard, every bit except some little pieces worked up in the Lady Chapel, and there in the souther mantel. Well, I may be mistook, but I say our choir never looked as well since. Still, there were a lot found out about the history of the church, and no doubt but what it did stand in need of repair. There were very few winters passed, but what we'd lose a pinnacle. Mr. Lake expressed his concurrence with Warby's views of restoration, but owns to a fear about this point lest the story proper should never be reached. Possibly this were perceptible in his manner. Warby hastened to reassure him. Not but what I could carry on about the topic for hours at a time, and do when I see an opportunity. But Dean Bursker, he were very set on the Gothic period, and nothing would serve him but everything must be made agreeable there. And one morning after service he appointed for my father to meet him in the choir. And he come back after he'd taken off his robe in the vestry, and he got a roll of paper with him, and the verger that were then brought in a table, and they began spreading it out on the table with prayer books to keep it down. My father helped him, and he saw it were a picture of the inside of a choir in a cathedral. And the dean, he were a quick-spoken gentleman, he says, "Well, Warby, what do you think of that?" "Why," says my father, "I don't think I have the pleasure of knowing that view. Would that be Hereford Cathedral, Mr. Dean?" "No, Warby," says the dean, "that's Southminster Cathedral, as we hope to see it before many years." "Indeed, sir," says my father, and that were all he did say, leastwise to the dean. He used to tell me he felt really faint in himself when he looked round our choir, as I can remember it, all comfortable and furnished like, and then see this nasty little dry picture, he called it, drawn out by some London architect. Well, there I am again, but you'll see what I mean if you look at this old view. Warby reached down on a frame print from the wall. Well, the long and short of it was that the dean, he handed over to my father a copy of an order of the chapter. He would clear out every bit of the choir, make a clean sweep, ready for the new work that was being designed up in town, and he ought to put it in hand as soon as ever he could get the breakers delivered. Now then, sir, if you look at that view, you'll see where the pulpit used to stand. That's what I want you to notice, if you please. It were indeed easily seen. An unusually large structure of timber, with domed sounding board, stand at the east side of the stalls on the north side of the choir, facing the bishop's throne. Worthy proceeded to explain that during the alterations, services was held in the nave, and members of the choir, being thereby disappointed of anticipated holiday, and the organist in particular incurring the suspicions of having wilfully damaged the mechanism of the temporary organ that were hired at considerable expense from London. The work of demolition began with the choir screen and organs loft, and proceeded gradually eastward, disclosing, as Warby said, many interesting features of older work. While this were going on, the members of the chapter were, naturally, in and about the choir a great deal. It soon became apparent that the elder Warby, who could not help overhearing some of their talk, on the part of the senior canons especially, there must have been a good deal of disagreement before the policy now being carried out had been adopted. Some was of the opinion they should catch their deaths of cold in the return stalls, unprotected by a screen from the draughts in the nave. Others objected to being exposed to the view of persons in the choir aisles, especially, they said, during the sermon, and they found it helpful to listen in a posture which were liable to misconstruction. The strongest opposition, however, come from the oldest of the body, who up at the last moment objected to the removal of the pulpit. "You ought not touch it, Mr. Dean," he said with great emphasis one morning, when the two were standing before it. "You don't know what mischief you may do." "Mischief? It's not a work of any particular merit, Canon." "Don't call me Canon," said the old man with great asperity. "That is, for 30 years I've been known as Dr. Alof, and I shall be obliged, Mr. Dean, if you'd kindly humour me in that manner. And as to the pulpit, which I preached from for 30 years, though I don't insist on that, all I say is, I know you're doing wrong in moving it. What sense could there be, my dearest doctor, in leaving it where it is when we're fitting up the rest of the choir in a totally different style? What reason could be given, apart from the look of the thing?" Reason, said old Dr. Alof. "If you young men, and I may say so without any disrespect, Mr. Dean, if you'd only listen to reason a little, and not always be asking for it, we should get on better. But there, I've said my say." The old gentleman levelled off, and as it were proved, never entered the cathedral again. The season, in a hot summer, turned sickly on a sudden. Dr. Alof was one of the first to go, with some affliction of the muscles of the throat, or the thorax, which took him painfully at night. And as many services, the number of choirmen and boys were very thin. Meanwhile, the pulpit had been done away with. In fact, the sounding board, part of which still exists as a table in the summer house in the palace garden, were taken down within an hour or two of Dr. Alof's protest. The removal of the base, not effected without considerable trouble, disclosed to view, greatly to the exultation of the restoring party, an altar tomb, a tomb, of course, to which Warby had attracted Late's attention the same evening. Much fruitless research was expended in attempts to identify the occupants. From that day to this, there had never been a name put to it. The structure had been most carefully boxed in under the pulpit base, so that such slight ornament as it possessed were not defaced. Only on the north side of it there was what looked like an injury, a gap between two of the slabs composing the side. It might be 2 or 3 inches across. Palmer, the mason, were directed to fill it in up in a week's time, when they come to do some other small jobs near that part of the choir. The season were undoubtedly very trying one. Whether the church were built on a site that had once been a marsh, it was suggested, or for whatever reason, the residents in its immediate neighbourhood had, many of them, but little enjoyment of the exquisite sunny days and the calm nights of August and September. To several of the older people, Dr. Ayloffe among others, as we have seen, the summer proved downright fatal, but even among the younger few escaped a sojourn in bed for a matter of weeks, or at the least a brooding sense of oppression accompanied by hateful nightmares. Gradually, it formulated itself a suspicion, which grew in a conviction that the alterations in the cathedral had something to say in the matter. The widow of a former old verger, a pensioner of the chapter of the Southminster, were visited by dreams, which she retailed to her friends, of a shape that slipped out of the little door of the south transept as the dark fell in, and fled, taking a fresh direction every night, about the close, disappearing for a while in an house after house, and finally emerging again when the night sky was paler. She could see nothing of it, she said, but they were moving from. But they were a moving form. Only she had an impression that when it returned to the church, as it seemed to do in the end of the dream, it turned its head. And then she could not tell why, but she thought it had red eyes. Warby remembered hearing the old lady tell this dream at a tea party in the house of the chaplain clerk. Its recurrence might perhaps, be said, be taken as a symptom of approaching illness. At any rate, before the end of September, the old lady were in her grave. I'm going to pause here briefly to have a quick sip of water. The interest excited by the restoration of this great church were not only confined to its own county. One day that summer, an FSA, as some celebrity, visited the place. His business was to write an account of the discoveries that had been made for the Society of Antiquaries, and his wife, who accompanied him, was to make a series of illustrative drawings for his report. In the morning she employed herself in making a general sketch of the choir. In the afternoon she devoted herself to details. She first drew the newly exposed altar tomb, and when that was finished she called her husband's attention to a beautiful piece of diaper ornament on the screen just beyond it, which had, like the tomb itself, been completely concealed by the pulpit. Of course, he said, an illustration of that must be made, so she seated herself on the tomb and began a careful drawing which occupied her till dusk. Her husband had, by this time, finished his work of measuring and description, and they agreed that it was time to be getting back to their hotel. "You may as well brush my skirt, Frank," said the lady. "It must have got covered with dust, I'm sure." He obeyed dutifully. After a moment he said, "I don't know whether you value this dress particularly, my dear, but I'm inclined to think it's seen its best days. It's a great bit of it gone." "Gone? Where?" she said. "I don't know where it's gone. But it's off at the bottom edge behind here." She pulled it hastily in aside, we're horrified to find a jagged tear extending some way into the substance of the stuff. "Very much," she said, "as if a dog had rent it away." The dress were, in any case, hopelessly spoiled, to her great vexation, and though they looked everywhere, the missing piece could not be found. There was many ways, they concluded, in which the injury might have come about, for the choir were full of old bits of woodwork with nails sticking out of them. Finally, they could only suppose that one of these had caused the mischief, and that the workman, who had been about all day, had carried off the particular piece with a fragment of dress still attached to it. It was about this time, or before, that his little dog began to wear an anxious expression when the hour for it to be put out into the shed in the backyard approached. For his mother had ordained that it must not sleep in the house. One evening, he said, when he was just going to pick it up and carry it out, it looked at him like a Christian and waved its hand, and I was going to say, well, you know how they do carry on sometimes, and the end of it was I put it under my coat and huddled it upstairs. and I'm afraid I as good as deceived my poor mother on the subject. After that, the dog acted very artful with hiding itself under the bed for half an hour or more before bedtime come, and worked it so as my mother never found out what we'd done. Of course, Warby were glad of his company anyhow, but more particularly when the nuisance that is still remembered in Southminster as the crying set in. Night after night, said Warby, that dog seemed to know it was coming. He'd creep out, he would, and snuggle into the bed and cuddle right up to me, shivering. And when the crying come, he'd be like a wild thing, shoving his head under my arm, and I was fully near as bad. 6 or 7 times we'd hear it, not more, and when he'd draw out his head again, I'd know it were over for the night. What was it like, sir? Well, I never heard but one thing that seemed to hit it off. I happened to be playing about in the close, and there were 2 of the canons met and said good morning to one another. Slept well last night, says one. It was Mr. Henslow, that one, and Mr. Lyle with the other. Can't say I did, said Mr. Lyle. Rather too much of Isaiah 34:14 for me. 34:14, says Mr. Henslow. What's that? You call yourself a Bible reader, said Mr. Lyle. Mr. Henslow, you must know, he was one of what used to be termed Simeon's lot. Pretty much what we should call the evangelical party. You go and look it up. And I wanted to know what he was getting at myself, and so off I ran home and got out my own Bible, and there it was. The Satyr shall cry to his fellow. Well, I thought, is that what we've been listening to these past nights? And I tell you, it made me look over my shoulder a time or two. Of course, I'd asked my father and mother about what it could be before that, but they both said it were most likely cats. They spoke very short, and I could see they was troubled. No word, that was a noise. Hungry like, as if it were calling after someone that wouldn't come. If ever you feel you wanted company, it would be when you was waiting for it to begin again. I believe 2 or 3 nights there were men put on the watch in different parts of the close. They all used to get together in one corner, the nearest they could to the high street, and nothing come of it. But the next thing was this. Me and another of the boys, he's in business in the city now as a grocer, like his father before him, we'd gone up into the choir after morning service were over, and we heard old Palmer, the mason, bellowing to some of his men. So we went up near, because we knew we were a rusty old chap and there might be some fun going. It appears Palmer had told this man to stop up the chink in the old tomb. Well, there was this man keeping on saying he'd done it the best he could, and there was Palmer carrying on like all possessed about it. Call that making a job of it, he says. If you had your rights, you'd get the sack for this. What do you suppose I pay your wages for? What do you suppose I'm going to say to the dean and the chapter when they come round? As come they may do any time, and see what you've been bungling about covering the old place with mess and plaster and Lord knows what. Well, master, I've done the best I could, says the man. I don't know more than what you do how it come to fall out this way. I tamped it right in the hole, he says. And now it's fell out, he says, I ne'er see. Fell out, says old Palmer. Why, it's nowhere near the place. Blowed out, you mean? And he picked up a bit of plaster, and so did I, that were laying against the screen, 3 or 4 feet off, and not dry yet. And old Palmer, he looked at it curious like, and then he turned round to me and says, Now then, you boys, have you been up to some of your games here? No, says I. I haven't, Mr. Palmer. There's none of us been about here till just this minute. And while I was talking, the other boy, Evans, he got looking in through the chink, and I heard him drawing his breath, and he come away sharp, and up to us, and he says, I believe there's something in there. I saw something shiny. What? I dare say, says old Palmer. Well, I ain't got time to stop about there. You, William, you go off and get some more stuff to make a job of it this time. If not, there'll be trouble in my yard, he says. So the man went off, and Palmer too, and us boys stopped behind, and I said to Evans, Would you really see anything in there? Yes, he says. I did indeed. So then I says, Let's shove something in and stir it up. We tried several of the bits of wood that were laying about, but they was all too big. Then Evans, he had a sheet of music he brought with him, an anthem with a service, I forget which it was now, and he rolled it up small and shoved it into the chink. 2 or 3 times he did it, and nothing happened. Give it me, boy, I said. I had a try. No, nothing happens. And I don't know why I thought of it, I'm sure, but I stooped down just opposite the chink, and put my 2 fingers in my mouth and whistled. You know the way. And at that, I seemed to think I heard something stirring. And I says to Evans, Come away, I says. I don't like this. Oh, right, he says. Give me that roll. And he took it and shoved it in. I don't think I ever saw anyone go so pale as he did. I say, Warby, he says. It's caught. Or someone's gotten hold of it. Pull it out or leave it, I says. Come on, let's get off. So I gave it a good pull and it come away. Leastways most of it did, but the end were gone. Torn off it were. Evans looked at it for a good second. Then he gave a sort of croak and let it drop, and we both bailed out of there as quick as we could. When we got outside, Evans says to me, "Did you see the end of that paper?" "No," I says. "Only it were torn." "Yes, it were," he says. "But it were wet too, and black." Well, partly because of the fright we had, and partly because the music we wanted in a day or two. We knew there'd be a set out about it with the organist. We didn't say nothing to anyone else, and I suppose the workmen, they swept up the bit that were left along with the rest of the rubbish. But Evans, if you were to ask him this very day about it, he'd stick to it. He saw the paper were wet and black at the end where it were torn. After that, the boys gave the choir a wild berth, so that Warby were not sure what were the result of the masons' renewed mending the tune. Only he made out from fragments of conversation dropped by the workmen passing through the choir that some difficulty had been met with, and the governor, Mr. Palmer the wit, had tried his own hand at the job. A little later he happened to see Mr. Palmer himself, knocking at the door of the deanery, and being admitted by the butler. A day or so after that, he gathered from a remark of his father let fall at breakfast that something a little out of the common would be done in the cathedral after morning service today, on the morrow. "I'd just as soon it were a day," his father added. "I don't see the use of running risks." "Father," I says, "what are you going to do in the cathedral tomorrow?" And he turned on me as savage as I ever seen him. He were a wonderful good-tempered man, as a general thing, my poor father was. "My lad," he says, "I'll trouble you not to go picking up your elders and betters talk. It's not manners and it's not straight. What I'm going to do or not going to do in the cathedral tomorrow is none of your business, and if I catch sight of you hanging about the place tomorrow after your work's done, I'll send you home with a flea in your ear. Now you mind that." Of course I said I was very sorry, and equally of course I went off and laid my plans with Evans. We knew there were a stir up in the corner of the transept which you can get up to the Trifolium, and in them days the door to it was pretty well always open, and even if it weren't, we knew the key usually laid under a bit of matting hard by. So we made up our minds we'd be putting away music and that next morning while the rest of the boys were clearing off, and then slip up at the stairs and watch from the Trifolium if there were any sign of working going on. That same night I dropped off asleep as sound as a boy does, and all of a sudden the dog woke me up, coming into bed, and thought, now we're going to get it sharp, for he seemed more frightened than usual. After about 5 minutes, sure enough, come this cry. I can't give you no idea what it was like, and so near too, nearer than I'd heard it yet. A funny thing, Mr. Lake. You know what a place this close is for an echo, and particularly if you sound this side of it. This cry never made no sign of an echo at all. But as I said, it were dreadful near this night, and on top of that, the start I got with hearing it, I got another fright, for I heard something rustling outside in the passage. Now to be sure I thought I was done, but I noticed the dog seemed to perk up a bit, and next there was someone whispering outside the door, and I very near laughed out loud, for I knew it was my father and mother that had got out of bed with the noise. "Whatever is it?" says my mother. "I sure don't know," says my father, excited like. "Don't disturb the boy, I hope he didn't hear nothing." So me knowing they was just outside, it made me bolder, and I slipped out of bed, crossed to my little window, giving on the close. But the dog, he bored tight down at the bottom of the bed, and I looked out. First off, I couldn't see anything. Then right down in the shadow under a buttress, I made out what I shall always say were 2 spots of red. A dull red it were, nothing like a lamp or a fire, but just so as you could pick 'em out of the black shadow. I hadn't but just sighted 'em when it seemed we wasn't the only people that had been disturbed, because I seen a window in the house on the left-hand side become lighted up, and the light moving. I just turned my head back to make sure of it, and then looked back in the shadow for those 2 red things, and they was gone. And for all I peered about and stared, there were not a sign more of them. Then come my last fright of that night. Something come against my bare leg. That were all right. That was my little dog had come out of bed, prancing about, making a great to-do, only holding his tongue, and my seeing he was quite in spirits again, I took him back to bed, and we slept the night out. Next morning I made my way out to tell my mother I'd had the dog in my room, and I was surprised after all. She said about it before, how quiet she took it. "Did you?" she says. "Well, by good rights you ought to go without your breakfast for doing such a thing behind my back. I don't know as there's any great harm done. Only another time you ask my permission, do you hear?" After a bit of that I said something as to my father about having heard the cats again. "Cats?" he says, and he looked over at my poor mother, and she coughed, and he says, "Oh, yes, cats. I believe I heard them myself." That were a funny one altogether. Nothing seemed to go right. The organist, he stopped in bed, and the minor canon, he forgot it was the 19th day and waited for the venite. And after a bit, the deputy set off playing the chant for evensong, which were a minor, and then the county boys were laughing so much they couldn't sing. And when it come to the anthem, the solo boy, he got took with the giggles, and made out his nose were bleeding, and shoved the book at me, what hadn't practised the verse and wasn't much of a singer if I'd known it. Well, things was rougher, you see, 50 years ago. I got a nip from the county tenor behind me that I remembered. So we got through somehow, and neither the men nor the boys weren't by well waiting to see whether the canon in residence, Mr. Enzo at work, would come to the vestries and find them. I don't believe he did. For one thing, I fancy he'd read the wrong lesson for the first time in his life, and knew it. Anyhow, Evans and me didn't find no difficulty in slipping up the stairs, as I told you. And when we got up, we laid ourselves down, flat on our stomachs, where we could just stretch our heads out over the old tomb. And we hadn't but just done it when we heard the verger that were them first shutting the iron poach gates and knocking the southwest door, then the transept door, so we knew there was something up, and they meant to keep the public out for a bit. Next thing were, the dean and the canon come in by their doors on the north, and then I see my father, and old Palmer, and a couple of their best men, and Palmer stood talking for a bit with the dean in the middle of the choir. He had a coil of rope, and the men had crows. The men had crows, All of them looked a bit nervous. So there they stood, talking, and at last I heard the dean say, "Well, I've no time to waste, Palmer. If you think this will satisfy Southminster people, I'll permit it to be done. But I must say this, and never in the whole course of my life have I heard such arrant nonsense from a practical man as I have from you. Don't you agree with me, Enslow?" As far as I could hear, Mr. Enslow said something like, "Ah, well, we're told, aren't we, Mr. Dean, not to judge others." And the dean, he gave a kind of sniff and walked straight up to the tomb and took his stand behind it, with his back to the screen, and the others, they come edging up rather gingerly. Enslow, he stopped on the tower side and scratched on his chin, he did. And the dean spoke up. "Palmer," he says, "which can you do the easiest, get the slab off the top, or shift one of the side slabs?" Old Palmer and his men, they potted about a bit, looking round the edge of the top slab and sanding the sides on the south and east and west, and everywhere but the north. Enzo said something about it being better to have a try at the south side, because there were more light and more room to move about him. Then my father, who'd been watching them, went round to the north side and knelt down and felt the slab by the chink. And he got up and dusted his knees and says to the dean, "Beg pardon, Mr. Dean, but I think if Mr. Palmer will try this here slab, you'll find it'll come out easy enough. Seems to me one of the men could prise out with his crowbar into this chink." "Ah, thank you, Wolby," says the dean. "That's a good suggestion. Palmer, let one of your men do that, will you?" So the man come round, put his bar in and bore on it, and just that minute, when they were all bending over, and we boys got our heads well over the edge of the trough for 'em, there comes a most fearful crash down at the west end of the choir, as if an old stack of big timber had fallen down a flight of stairs. Well, you can't expect me to tell you everything that happened all in a minute. Of course, there were a terrible commotion. I heard the slab fall out and the crowbar on the floor, and I heard the dean say, "Good God!" When I looked down again, I saw the dean tumbled over on the floor. Men was making off down the choir. Enzo was just going to up the dean up. Palmer were going to stop the men, as he said afterwards. And my father was sitting on the altar step, with his face in his hands. The dean, he were very cross. "Wish to goodness you'd look where you're coming to, Enzo," he says. "Why you should all take your heels when a stick of wood tumbles down, I cannot imagine." All Enzo could do, explaining he were right away on the other side of the tomb, would not satisfy him. And Palmer come back and reported that there were nothing to account for this noise, and nothing seemed nearly fallen down. Once the dean finished feeling of himself, they gathered round, except my father. He sat real well, and someone lighted up a bit of candle, and they looked into the tomb. "Nothing there," says the dean. "What did I tell you?" "Stay, here's something. What's this?" "A bit of music paper and a piece of torn stuff. Part of the dress, it looks like. Both quite modern, no interest whatever. Another time perhaps you'll take the advice of an educated man, or something like that." And off he went, limping a bit and out through the north door. And as he went, he called back angrily to Palmer for leaving the door standing open. Palmer called out, "Very sorry, sir." He shrugged his shoulders, and Enslow says, "I fancy Mr. Dean's mistaken. I closed the doors behind me. He's a little upset." And Palmer says, "Well, where's Wolby?" And they saw him sit on the steps and went up to him. He was recovering himself, it seemed, and wiping his forehead, and Palmer helped him up onto his legs, as I was glad to see. They were too far off for me to hear what they said. My father pointed at the north door in the aisle, and Palmer and Enslow, both of them, looked very surprised and scared. After a bit, my father and Enslow went out of the church, and the others made with haste they could to put the slab back and plaster it in. About the clock struck 12, the cathedral were opened again, and us boys made the best of our way home. I were in great taking to know what we had given my poor father such a turn. And when I got in and found him sitting in his chair, taking a glass of spirits, and my mother standing looking anxious at him, I couldn't keep from bursting out and making confession where I'd been. He didn't seem to take on, not in the way of losing his temper. You were there, was you? Where did you see it? I see everything, father, I said, except when the noise come. Did you see what it was that knocked the dean over, he says. That will come out of the monument. You didn't? That's a mercy. Why, what were it, father? I said. Come, you must have seen it, he says. Didn't you see it? A thing like a man, all over air, and two great eyes to it. That were all I could get out of him, that time, and later on he seemed as if he were ashamed of being so frightened, and he used to put me off whenever I asked him about it. But years after, when I got to be a grown man, we had more talk now, and again on the matter, and he always said the same thing. Black it were, he'd say, and a mass of hair and two legs, and the like on its eyes. And that's the tale of the tomb, Mr. Lake. It's the one we don't tell to our visitors. I should be obliged of you not to make use of it until I'm out of the way. I doubt Mr. Evans will feel the same as I do if you ask him. It proved to be the case. Over 20 years have passed by, and the grass has grown over both Warby and Evans. So Mr. Lake felt no difficulty about communicating his notes, taken in 1890, to me. He accompanied them with a sketch of the tomb and a copy of the short inscription on the medal cross, which were affixed at the expense of Dr. Lyle in the centre of the northern side. They were from the Vulgate of Isaiah 34, and consisted merely of the three words, Ibi cubavit lamia. Ibi cubavit lamia. Now, I'm not super up on my Latin, and that phrase entirely escapes me, but that's the end of the piece. So I suppose we must leave it there. I'll move back over to my own, just got my own comfortable bed. Oh, am I back now? It seems I am. Oh, no, never mind. I was back only for a second and now I am once again distortion. What a world, what a world. Well, I'll stay here on my bed anyway, since it's comfortable for me and the distortion can't be too bad. So, let's see what we can say of it then, shall we? So, not quite a cursed object this time. Rather, well, I guess, no, the tomb's not cursed. There's just something in it, isn't there? An horrid beast of some kind. I'm almost inclined to call this a sort of vampire story. There's no explicit blood drinker or anything. There's something that seeps out of the tomb, stalks people, makes them ill by presumably feeding off them or just afflicting them. Red eyes in the dark, you know? Pair it with the sort of ability of Dracula to turn into mist that's so common among vampires in the old school, and you could see this as a vampire one. That's why I'd be inclined to classify it, much in the same way as Ulala by Stevenson were. Not explicitly a vampire story, but feels like one. What else is there to say? There's another account of some church history here, which seems to be something of a theme in James. Not as much as in some of the early stuff he's read, but it's definitely come up a fair bit. That and academics seem to be quite common with him. And it's just an history of the piece, really. The idea that it was recounted some 20 years ago. Date's given indefinite here, which is a bit more solid than some of his stuff. We have a dog acting as a sort of alert system. And dogs frequently come up as, I find, as themes in fiction. A lamp disagrees with me about it, but yeah. Dog able to be aware of the evil and scared, not really defended in this case, but scared of it, and so give an indication. An interesting little story, but I don't think there's much to say about it, other than that. And I found that the sound that is interesting, the sort of noise that emerged, that distracted everyone. And obviously it's a convenient piece of storytelling to avoid everyone having seen it and confirm and make it more horrible for the elder burden, the man who saw it, but I don't know, it's curious. This one is also a bit more directly narrated than some of them, being told by, or half at least told by, someone who was the primary witness to it. So that's interesting. The perspective of a boy who's sort of creeping around and peeping at things that aren't supposed to be known to him is quite a good one for a storyteller, I find. But yeah, I don't think I've got a whole lot to say about this one, really. I think that's about the long and short what I've got to say about it. I don't feel like reading out tonight, so I won't do that. But yeah, thank you to everyone who come, assuming that there is anyone beside Abbe, and even if there's not, thank you to Abbe. I do always appreciate it. And of course to anyone who watches the VODs in the future, I thank you always for showing up. I do appreciate it, and I do hope that the rest of your day or evening or night or whatever time it is for you is a pleasant one. I've broken a bit from the schedule I was sort of planning, but probably I'll be on tomorrow, I don't know. I felt a bit funny today. You see how I feel. You're very welcome, Abbe. Thank you for showing up, I do appreciate it. But yeah, is there anything else to say before we go? I don't think so. Only that I appreciate you, and I hope you enjoy these stories. And as always, ta-ra.